roundtable discussion on ASREN and the infrastructure's developments in the Arab world. So I would like to invite, I'm Federico Ruggeri, the project manager of Chain Rights Project and INFN Italy. So I would like to invite the session panelists, that are invited to join us here on the podium. So first of all, David West, the project manager of UMed Connect 3 from Dante, UK. Salem Alektash is already here. He's the managing director of ASREN and is currently in Bahrain. Then Mohammad El Jazar, manager of information security from Qatar University, Qatar. And Tiwange Sulira Banda, who is the manager of UbuntuNet Alliance in Malawi. So, after having collected this impressive list of speakers, so let me introduce this session. I think we have seen a lot of presentations and very interesting topics during this day. So it's probably time for trying to see if we can distill something which is, in your opinion, one of the most important results of this first day. And of course, if you have suggestions for other topics, we are here to discuss. So first of all, I will like to invite all of you to make some statements about the infrastructures, what you think they are, how they can contribute to the research and education sector. And then we will see, I have another couple of questions. And then if we have time, we can also ask to the audience if they have questions or comments that we can discuss. So, first of all, Salem, would you like to introduce the topic on the infrastructures? What do you think about?
If you allow me first to go back like 40 years ago when the DARPANET project started as a support, as funds from the NSF. And the whole idea was to create links and connectivity between research centers and universities. And when this evolved, I know that most of you are experts on this subject, but I just want to tell a story so that where we are today. And when this was very successful, it began to be used for commercial purposes, and then commercial internet came into existence. But the US was very careful at that time, and they established Internet 2 in 1996. And the purpose of Internet 2 is to go back to the principles, which means that universities and research centers' networks are isolated from the commercial internet. And this is, in fact, the whole idea of research and education networks. In Europe, Giant; in the US, Internet 2; in Latin America, Red Clara; in Africa, UbuntuNet; and there is now ASREN emerging, and ASREN in the northern part of Africa, EPAN, and so all regions worldwide are beginning to establish this dedicated infrastructure for research and education. And so what I see from my perspective is there is now an emerging connectivity at the world level that is in parallel to the internet. And the purpose simply is just to help support researchers and universities and to allow them or to give them tools so that they can collaborate, push data, use services, applications, facilities everywhere in the world. And the world has become like a village. And that's what we're trying to do in the Arab region. We're trying to help build ANRENs in the Arab countries and interconnect them together. But it's not only networks, it's not only the connectivity, but also you need collaboration, you need services, you need applications. And we see today that, all the research communities, and this is by nature, researchers are always open to give what they have as information. And so, we are very lucky that we live in a world that everyone is contributing. So, European partners, the US partners, all over the world, from Asia Pacific and everywhere, that researchers are willing to give up and to make those resources available for people to use, especially in our countries. And we are so happy that if we are able to collaborate and work together to build this research infrastructure and make the interconnection, the connectivity available, then our young researchers, our young students will be able to get access and tap in so many resources that exist at the world level. And this is what we are aiming for. So it's about connectivity, it's about access to resources and facilities and services, it's about collaboration. And this is what I see is more important as a message that I would like to convey today.
Thank you, Salem. Could you pass the microphone to David? So David.
Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you, Salem. I think e-infrastructure is an absolutely fundamental building block of any NRENs. If you look at the Europe case back in the early 90s, a small group of European countries which had already formed NRENs were dissatisfied with the services they could get at the time from the commercial internet. They weren't fast enough, they were not reliable enough, they weren't sufficiently clear that in terms of their bandwidth that scientists could do what they wanted to do with these services. They therefore decided that they needed an international links between them. They realized that wasn't a cost-effective thing for them all to do on a bilateral basis. It was much better to have a regional approach to that. That's what they did when they decided to form Dante, and that's what led ultimately to a much larger grouping involving a much wider range of NRENs with a much wider and higher capacity and wider range of services, which formed JAILT. And that model we've seen at various times to varying degrees has now extended to other regions of the world. I think yesterday I said I thought there were about 120 NRENs in the world today. All NRENs end up with their own dedicated networks because for very similar reasons that the commercial services are not as far advanced and need something dedicated to be useful. We've seen this in other world regions develop. We're beginning to see it here, and I very much hope that the regional level of the network will also develop in time, and that's very much where I see what we've started to do with UMed Connect and what we're now doing in partnership and ultimately handing over to ASREN will also achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So you have already the microphone. So Mohammed, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Mohammed, excuse me. First of all, I'd like to make a disclaimer. I am not in charge of the UNREN project, so whatever I say is not necessarily an official word. Don't shoot me. If you don't mind, I'll take about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to explain what Qatar, a few things about Qatar and also a few things that are going on. It's a very small country, relatively speaking, but it has a lot of ambition. The vision, the 2030 vision for the country was set in 2008, and I'll use my own words to summarize it, is to build, to achieve having a knowledge-based society that is in tune with the world and with the environment. A few words that I think summarize it. There are 4 pillars that it's built on. It's a very elaborate document, and it's not just a document, it's really a living thing. What I see in different organizations, including where I work, which is Qatar University, is that this vision is what drives everything that's going on in the country. A lot of things that are going on in the country, actually, which is a good thing. It's a small country. Things can happen very quickly. A lot of people don't know or question what does, it's a tiny country. What kind of research could possibly emerge from that. And the reality is that there is actually has been a lot of research that's going on. A lot of you probably are familiar with Qatar Foundation, which is a huge organization that is established for education and research and many, many other things. It has its hands everywhere, pretty much. It is a semi-governmental, this is my understanding, I hope I'm not wrong, but this is a semi-government agency. It's independent, but still it's funded by the government. A lot of research goes on in Qatar Foundation, has been going on for a while. And for those of you who don't know, there's an education city, which includes 6 or 7 campuses of specific colleges of major US universities and one European university recently. Universities like Georgetown, Carnegie Mellon, Texas A&M, but each one has its own one program that is running there. And a lot of research happens outside these universities as well. What I'm hearing is that in the next few years there will be thousands, I've heard figures between 2,000 and 5,000 researchers that would be housed, that would be stationed in Qatar Foundation to do all kinds of research. This is one big area. Another area, there is also a research, state-of-the-art research medical center for women and children that is very, very close to opening, actually. Should be opening, I believe, next year, called Sidra. And this one houses top-of-the-line technologies, leading-edge technologies, and there is serious work on research. And just yesterday, Sheikh Hamoza announced that the kickoff of the Genome Project for Qatar. The Qatar University itself has a huge research budget. There is a lot of research has picked up lately, and the 2 things that people ask for is compute power, actually 3 things: compute power, storage, and networking capabilities, and connectivity, of course, to the outside world. So a REN for Qatar is way overdue. If you look at the amount of research, one question I was asked today is when in the conversation today, earlier today, we should plan, look at the needs and everything. This is one way to take the systematic approach and say, assess the needs, go see who is doing research, what kind of needs they want, and then build it. What we're doing is taking another approach, which is kind of like building highways. We build them, you build them, and they'll use them. We're building the highways at this point. That's what we're doing. In the past, until recently, until actually probably a couple of years ago, I know Qatar Foundation has been in the front of research of a REN, typically referred to as QF-REN. Internal changes within the Qatar Foundation have abruptly stopped those official efforts, if you will. There were some reorganizations and changes in staff, changes in the organization internally. So it was kind of hanging in there. So what Qatar University did, is we proposed to the government to establish, to take the lead, or we proposed to them basically establishing a national REN for Qatar, because this was needed, and we needed to use it. And we were tasked with doing that with the condition that it would be an independent organization. And that's what QNREN is. It is not a Qatar University organization. It is an independent university, entity, that will be nonprofit, and the governance will follow best practices for NREN. So we are starting on the right foot, I believe. The details are being worked, so we're not there yet, but there are a couple of things that help us quite a bit on the ground. For the last few years, there's been talk about, for the last couple of years actually, about the Qatar National Broadband Network. And 2 weeks ago, it was announced officially. There was a one-day symposium in Doha, headed by the ICT minister. And it was announced, the plan was finally announced after being revised. Some of its objectives are pretty aggressive. Like by 2016, one objective is to have 95% of households connected with fiber. Competition, they want to foster competition. Right now, there are until recently, until about 5 years ago, I think, there were 5-6 years ago, there was only one company, QTEL at the time. Now it's Ooredoo. But since then, Vodafone has been in the market and has been setting foot in there. So there is some competition, but they want to foster more competition. The positive thing from the National Broadband Plan is that the executive arm, one of the tools, one of the executive arms is what is called QNBN. It's an organization that is responsible for laying fiber across Qatar internally. So QNBN can provide fiber to anyone, individuals or organizations, and there's no monopoly in that sense. It's not going to the telephone company and asking them for this and then wait and wait and wait. That's one thing. The other thing is that there's also another organization that's called Gulf Bridge International, GBI, that probably not many of you have heard of, but it's been, I think, 3 or 4 years. It was established 3 or 4 years, but they've done a lot. I think they have now about 25,000 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, of marine cable. They're international cable company. They're digitally cable. They cable through the under the sea, and they have a landing station in Qatar, and this is another venue for us to reach to the outside world, aside from the traditional connectivity options. Qatar, what we're trying to do with QNREN is really we're moving along with the Qatar national vision. We want to make the country one of the top. It's a small country, but it wants to be the first, and we'll work on that. First in the region, first in the world, who knows? There are a lot of things that Qatar has surprised the world, I think, with a few things. One of them is Al Jazeera, probably. Everybody knows Al Jazeera by now. Nobody probably would have thought that Qatar, this tiny country, could bring up something like that. It's just an example, and who knows what else can come out of there. So research is in the works. I'm hoping that by next year, this time next year, we will have things set up and we will have some more details and more real data to show.
Thank you, Mohammed. The microphone is to Tiwanga. So, Tiwanga.
Thank you, Federico, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for allowing me to be part of this panel to say something, and I really appreciate it. It's my first time being at an ASREN event, and I'm excited to see everyone here. I just want to say a little bit about UbuntuNet Alliance and in Eastern and Southern Africa. Research and education networking started in that region maybe around 1999 and 2000, when the first ASREN was established in Kenya in 1999, and then the second one followed in South Africa in 2000. Then there was a period where maybe the other countries were discussing, but nothing tangible came up from around 2000 to say about 2005, when within the framework of the Association of African Universities, it was realized that universities were paying a lot of money for very little bandwidth. Then that was around the same time discussions about the East African submarine cable was ongoing. And then the research and education community came together then and decided that a regional research and education organization should be established. And then UbuntuNet was born. There were so many people that were involved then. A team from within our region, but also friends from other regions, friends from Internet 2, friends from Dante, and the organization was established. And there we have been. What we have done is, we did not have the infrastructure for quite some time, but we had a community of people willing to work together, and for a very long period of time, we were like that, a group of people trying to do something. Then we established our first router, it depends from where you're coming from, in London, connecting with Giant, and that was the beginning. 2 ASRENs connected there. We allowed the ASRENs to use their existing infrastructure to get to London, and that was the case, and we were proud to have something to call our network, and we call the network UbuntuNet. So that was, people say, a 1-meter cable in London. That was the first, and connecting to the router that was donated by Cisco. That was what we started with, and then several ASRENs started coming on board. And now we are very happy that within the framework of the Africa Connect project, the European Commission has come to our help, and we are working with Dante to establish a regional network in Eastern Southern Africa. And as of now, IRUs have been purchased on the major cables and the network is rolling out. The first links at the moment are almost finished, like the first link coming from Amsterdam to Mombasa, then to Dar es Salaam, then to Maputo, and going to Mtuzini in South Africa. And another one coming from Mombasa, Nairobi, Kampala in Uganda, and then going to Rwanda. So we are proud of this, and things are happening. So in terms of the infrastructure, things are happening like that. At the moment, there are about 14 NRENs in the region. Countries like Somalia and Sudan belong to both ASREN and UbuntuNet, and we are very happy. We call them bridging countries. They interact with ASREN and they also interact with us, and we are very proud of that. So from the infrastructure side, things are happening, the network is rolling out. Then we have so many communities of researchers that are at different levels of awareness. Some are used to old ways of doing things, others are coming up, trying to embrace collaboration using e-infrastructures. And that is it's rather moving slowly, but at least there is something happening. Mostly in South Africa and Kenya, things are beginning to pick up. So from then to the research part, I would say a lot is happening and people are trying to notice that the infrastructure is there. And within projects like ChainReds and EI for Africa, we have been working with the institutions in trying to work on certification authorities and identity providers and identity federations. So that is also bringing to build another level of the infrastructure. So I should say a lot is happening in Eastern and Southern Africa, and there is a lot of excitement, and thanks to all our partners.
Thank you, Tivonge, to all the speakers. So let me pose another question related to our topic. I mean, which is, in your perspective, which are the strengths and the weaknesses that you see in the deployment of e-infrastructures in the Arab world? In other words, where should we invest more, or we should focus more in order to profit from the strengths and try to avoid traps and weaknesses in this deployment in order to be more effective and try to reach the objective faster? So first, I would ask to Salem.
Yesterday we had the ChainReds workshop, and I had a presentation. And one of the things that I mentioned is for a success of the Arab ANRENs to come together and contribute to developing the Arab States Research Education Network is to have champions from the countries who can really support building this research infrastructure. Champions are very important, but also we need to create awareness, and the awareness should go into the level of the decision makers. Today I had very interesting discussions with Her Excellency Ambassador Faiq Al-Saleh from the League of Arab States, and we're trying to take this forward a step, that we want to submit a proposal to the League of Arab States on how do we move forward as ASREN, like Arab Connect, tying this proposal to the needs to support youth in terms of access, resources, facilities, create more innovation. And I think the support of the League of Arab States in playing this political leadership is very important. And we need this. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're looking for, is to have this political umbrella that can help ministers in all the Arab countries understand why is it important that we need to build this research infrastructure? Why is it important that we want to create this connectivity? I think this is what I see now as a strength that we would like to approach. The weakness that we could, and this is something that we have to work so hard in solving those issues of cross-border connection are very expensive. There has not been very much of investment from telecom operators. We had some discussions from some of the regulatory authorities in the Arab countries in one of the ITU conferences. And they're claiming that there are lots of capacity, cross-border capacity, but it's underutilized. But the issue of buying capacity on those links are very, very expensive. I was giving some examples yesterday, like we're creating those two POPs. One is in Egypt and one in United Arab Emirates. In addition to what we are now investing in London as a POP that give us the access to European, to the US, to Red Clara and the African, all other regional networks. But the issue here is the last mile connection. And I had this discussion also with Yves, and Yves is really expert in this direction, that he always mentions about the local operators are really the guys who set in front of any advancement to make this interconnections across the Arab regions. How do we try to solve this issue? We solve this by working with the regulatory authorities, by trying to convince telecom operators to invest in research education network. There are lots of opportunities. The success of Event2Net, in bringing this Africa Connect project, long-term capacity lease, try to create this cross-border connection. I mean, this has been very successful in Africa. We're trying to follow the same model, but this will take a little bit of time. We need champions. We need telecom operators to be, contributing to what we're doing, to the research community. We want to work with the political leaders. We want to work with decision makers and convince them why is it important that we have to do for our youth and for our next generation in establishing this interconnection across the region.
I think back to the fact when the first UMed Connect network started up in 2004, so 9 years ago, and we're now on the third phase. So I've been looking at this region and working with people in this region for quite a long time. Looking back, I think one of the strengths I see is that certainly national NREN networks have definitely grown in number and scale. When I first was working in this region in Morocco, we had an extremely small network. We're now on the third phase of the network, and the fourth phase is about to be tendered for. If you look in, same in Algeria, very small networks when we started, now a really big substantial network in country, connecting all the universities very successfully. We heard this morning from Habib about how Tunisia has developed from, again, very small networks in the mid-1990s to really quite substantial and impressive national networks. And so those are impressive. We've seen more NRENs as well starting to form as well. So there is a movement which I think is starting to create good infrastructure in country for the users. I also think the big strength is that finally we are starting to regard things from a pan-Arab perspective. I think when we had the first e-age meeting, for example, there was limited representation from the Gulf area. Today, we expect that the e-age conferences will have people from all over the region, and here we have Iraq and Libya and Yemen and other countries that haven't participated in a big way before. I know some have been occasional representatives, but we are now getting much more representation across the region. That is another good strength and a step towards making things happen. I think where I see weaknesses is still at the regional level in UMed Connect, we had individual international links from individual countries to mainly to Europe, because we couldn't, because it wasn't possible for cost or technical reasons to provide links between neighbouring countries most often. And again, there's signs that's going to change. The e-infrastructure that Salem has described, setting up a London POP for the first time, just like UbuntuNet did when it started out, working with Egypt to try and set up a light path exchange there, working in the Gulf to maybe set up one in Fujairah as well. These are good developments, and I think one of the key things now is for individual NRENs to get behind these developments, stop trying to do individual things, get behind a regional initiative, because that, I think, is the way to go. Was I going to say something else? That's all for now, I think.
So, Mohammed?
I'd like to complement what Mr. Salem, Dr. Salem said, and that is one thing that ASREN itself can do, and I don't know if you've already started this or not, but is to actually start this communication yourself, going to the top with the appropriate level of communication, obviously, knowing what is going on in the country. For example, today, you know that I'm coming from Qatar, but does everyone in Qatar know? Do the right people in Qatar know? In our case, we're lucky because our university is obviously aware of it. The ICT Qatar, the minister of ICT is aware of it, but who else is aware of it? Who knows what is going on? Now, one thing that you can do as ASREN is of course, with the name of the Arab League and with the name of, with your mission, and vision and mission, you can emphasize this at a higher level, at least raise this awareness at that level. If they don't react, then look for the champions that you see are contributing, and see if you can have those, give them some tools or resources to help. Back to issues, you're right. The local loop typically is the problem, is the most expensive. But one thing that might help, I don't know if it helps or not, but one thing that could help is to get the nodes of the camel into the tent, basically. Don't start with huge investments. Don't start with a gig, maybe start with 50 meg. Give them a taste of what this is about, give them the connectivity that they want, and then they will start complaining. So that's kind of negative feedback to their management saying, this is not working well, and then their management will maybe know it's kind of working around it, basically. But that makes it maybe easier for organizations to start, to get a taste of it, and maybe that's all they need for now. Initially, just access to certain things that is fine for them, or it moves their hunger inside them and makes them really push for more bandwidth and for more establishment of things. Another thing that ASREN can help with is for emerging NRENs, especially like ourselves, is if you have, and I'm sure you already offered, and I appreciate that, to offer guidance about how to do things right, what to do and what not to do, which is more important, I think. Be careful, learn from mistakes, and do this way. That would help us a lot. And one final thing is that, back to David's comment, is if we wait until ASREN has POPs that are active, then we may be a little bit late. So until we see something on the ground, we have to do something. So ASREN, please hurry up.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. So, Tiwanga?
Thank you. One strength that I see with the ASREN region is that it could also be a weakness, but I look at it as a strength, is that the region is diverse. You have very rich countries, and more especially in the Gulf, and other countries not as poor as compared to Sub-Saharan Africa, but you are at least somehow better. So to me, that is a huge strength. And the other thing, from there, then I would relate to what was happening in our region, that those that are better off were taken as good examples, and since they were in the front, the others followed. I'm talking of countries like, more especially South Africa and Kenya. So in this region, then those countries that are better off could start, and the other countries would follow. Secondly, another strength that I see is the experience that the region has gained from the implementation of the EU MedConnect project. Over the years, I think that is a plus, that is a huge asset that the region has. So it's an issue of starting from there and moving forward. And also the fact that there are a lot of cases, like the successes from, I don't know if I can call it the success, because from my own perspective, we are moving very well in Eastern and Southern Africa, but I was excited to listen to people here say that there is a lot, taking our region as a good success story. So that the region can learn from what is happening in Eastern and Southern Africa. And also the huge experience from Dante and the huge experience from the other regions. So there is a lot to learn from, and there is a lot of mistakes that you will not commit because the other regions have already committed them. So that's a huge strength. I'm trying to figure out a weakness, but I don't know. I think the region is well positioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Tumonga. And so, because this is a round table, we start again from the beginning. Although we have not a round table, but we have many. So, I think we have start again with another question to you. In your experience, we saw several other examples of infrastructures in other regions of the world. And so do you think there is something which is useful in their experience that can possibly be replicated in the Arab world? And not only in Europe or US, which of course are very advanced in the region in research infrastructures, but also, as we have seen in Asia or possibly in Latin America, in Africa, and so on. So do you think that there are specific things which are different in the Arab world which do not make possible to replicate this experience, or you think that there is most of this experience which can be used for, going on with the Arab infrastructures? So, Salem?
I think, I still remember the first day when I met my colleague, Mr. Yusuf Turman, and that was offered to our chairman, Dr. Talal Abu Ghazali, explaining why do we need the research education network, and I had a little bit of chat with him. Though I consider myself a professor at university and I have been doing lots of research, but I was not really picking the idea of why research and education network was necessary for me as a university professor. Maybe my domain of expertise was a little bit different because I did not really need this huge, big pipes that I can do my research. But on the other hand, what I consider is more important now is not something that, many researchers in our region, maybe they're not aware, or some of them, they're not aware that there is really a necessity for some of the researchers. And some of the researchers, they're not seeking it because they see, maybe it's not available, or maybe it needs a huge investment to to evaluate and to say, okay, this justifies the return on investment. And there's several cases during our discussions during the past 3 years with ministers in many of the countries who are picking up to build their research infrastructure. So, some of the stories I still remember, and one of the ministers, when we were trying to explain, we really need to help support this country to build this research infrastructure. And the first question that he was asking us, can you tell me statistically, if you build this research infrastructure and we as government spent, let's say, millions of dollars on developing the fiber connections and setting up the network and everything, can you tell us some estimates, how this will bring advancement on research in terms of innovation, in terms of research production, in terms of... We could not come up with this statistics because to me this is something that you can't really measure. And again, the question of Dr. Federico is, every region has its own dynamics. And this is a model that you cannot really pick up what are the real dynamics, the social fabrics in our region that can motivate the need of research infrastructure. If we go back, let's say, 12 or 15 years in our region, was internet necessary at that time? The question is, if you have discussed this with a minister or university president, he would tell you, is it needed? Our professors are working without the internet, and they're doing lots of things without the internet because of the digital divide, because of the unawareness, because of no people are speaking about the whole thing. So again, I think this is a very complicated, system of lots of parameters that we try to figure out, how does it work? So I think this goes into a very philosophical question. I mean, do we learn, let's say, from Ubuntu.net? I think yes, but dynamics are very different. I very much go into ASREN and I go into Ubuntu.net conferences. It's totally different. Most of the time, I feel very jealous of how people are motivated to work together. I feel very jealous to see the kind of momentum coming from ASRENs in Kenya, for instance, in Tanzania, in South Africa. Those are the champions we are looking for in our region. They're missing, to be frank with you. I mean, we find few people of us who have been working so hard with us, but still, there are lots of things that has to be done to be able to make it a success. So regions have different dynamics, regions have different social fabrics, regions have different political situations, and regions have different monetary status. But the whole thing, at the end, affect what is it that we can do in the Arab region. It's all about we have to be passionate. It's all about that we have to keep working. We cannot just say give up. I mean, this has become my colleague, Mr. Yusuf Turman, with the support of our chairman, this has become our passionate, and we want to continue to do it until it evolves and becomes a success.
Thank you.
A couple of thoughts. I think one of the things I perceive people think about this region sometimes is that it's simply too big and too diverse to really be treated as a region. But I mean, we have seen this in other parts of the world as well. If you look at Asia, for example, as Marcus explained earlier, I mean, half the world's population is in that region. There is an immense digital divide in Asia between the largest and richest of the countries and the smallest of the countries. In the TAIN program, we have particularly focused on help supporting the small countries there, but there's been a vast amount of support from the more established countries, and through the APAN network and the collaboration there, we've actually managed to create something which is actually a win-win for all of those countries. And I think the fact that we have countries that are at different stages of development in this region, some very, very well resourced, some not so well resourced, I think there is scope, provided there is a will to work together, for there to be benefit out of that. And I think the trick is to sort of find those things that are most beneficial to all.
You asked about replication. What can be replicated? What can we benefit from? I think that we are already doing this by being here. We saw what others are doing in the world, so ASREN was initiated because of this. That makes sense at the high level. What we need to do is, what we can do as far as replication or having a cookie cutter kind of setup is, maybe you can have some best practices for NRENs. Do this, again, I go back to the do this and don't do that kind of stuff, to have a healthy environment. Dr. Salem raises a very, very interesting question about the dynamics. One of the things that I see missing in the Arab world, and I could be wrong, so forgive me if I'm mistaken. I am not from the academic world. I've worked with universities, but I'm not in touch with the academic world as much. There's not enough emphasis on research, at least it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's not enough emphasis on research from faculty to actually be involved in research. I know that in the States, excuse me, in the States, faculty who are not tenured, who have not, been secured their job, they have to continue doing the research. They have to present papers. So they have to be involved in that, and that, of course, generates volume. And that generates needs depending on the discipline that they're working in. So I don't know if I'm right or not. That's one thing, that's one issue. The other issue that I see is that depending on the country, there are differences in the dynamics between the countries, among the countries as well. In Qatar, for example, or I think in the Gulf region in general, and again, I could be wrong, the majority of the faculty or the majority of researchers are not locals. They are not local nationals. They're coming from outside. And if they are not, they typically come from the Western world. A lot of them come from the Western world, a lot from the Arab world, obviously. But the ones that come from the Western world maybe are used to the research mentality, and they may see a break from having to do things. But they're ready. So maybe we should, maybe they should be encouraged to keep what they were doing and be encouraged to do research and bring in their ideas with research. And that goes back to how the education is actually done. Maybe it goes back to the other conference that's going on now with the quality of education. Research has to be done by people who are, has to be enforced in a way to happen in the Arab world, it seems to me. And I'm sad to say that, but that's what I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you. Mohammed, do you want to go?
Thank you. My boss Tusu likes saying that building an NRN is like a marriage, he says. He says that people will tell you so many things about how to manage your marriage, but once you marry, you realize that you have to figure out your own way of managing it. So I think I agree with him. But there is so many things that we can learn from one another or from the other regions. What we have seen in our region is that John Dyer calls it the NRN model. So this NRN model, I think, is a good approach. Let's continue building NRNs, and I think it's something that has been proved to be working. So let every country establish an NRN, then at regional level, ASREN. The other thing is, where necessary, and I think this should be the approach is to get IRUs. Let's get long-term assets on cross-border links or any other links that we can get. That is going to help a lot, and that is going to keep the regional organization together for quite some time. And the other thing that I see is that, as Salim already said, about having champions in the regions, or I can call them, we build a critical mass of people that will fly our flags, that will fly the flag of ASREN in their countries and also at regional level. And this would need a lot of awareness raising at all levels. It could be scientists, it could be politicians, it could be policymakers. Catherine Stover of Dante, our good friend, told us that when she was working in South America, several years ago, she met one professor. After she had given a presentation about what they were trying to do in Led Clara, the professor stood up and said, "What you are doing is you are trying to solve my problem. You are an answer to what I have been trying to do for a very long time." So then they immediately identified him as their champion, a researcher, and I mean as a champion. So these champions could be researchers, they could be professors, or they could be politicians, or they could as well be any other person who is going to fly the flag. So I think that is a good approach. The other thing I think is to build demand. Because it's all about the research community. So if we also target deliberately the research community, that is going to be a huge plus. The good thing with the region is that in the ASREN, the Arab region, is that they are already established and old universities, and there are so many of them, and so many research centers, and so many. So I can say that the demand is already there. It's an issue of stimulating them. In our region, we say trying to teach the science, or to tell the scientists or the researchers to move on to new ways of doing research or new ways of conducting research and science. So probably that approach could work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiwanga. So I would like to add a short story to this. I was in a meeting, in a little meeting of a project, European project, and there was a representative from one of the Arab countries, I mean, the ministries of the Arab countries, and came to me and said, well, look, we have difficulties in paying this link to Europe because it's very little used. I mean, there are very few bits passing there, and it costs a lot of money. So why should we pay for that? And I told him, well, I would be much worried by the fact that you don't have traffic between your universities and the European or US universities than the fact that it costs a lot. I mean, this is much worrying for me. If you don't have traffic, it means that you are not doing research, that you are not accessing others' information. So this is really worrying, not the cost that you pay for it. So we should improve the usage of the link instead of trying to cut it. So this is sometimes the mentality of bureaucrats that we find in the ministries. And we have to fight against this, because this is the best way we can work, trying to convince them that this is useful. And the problem is not the cost. The problem is the development of universities and research. And those two things go together. You cannot have research if you don't have higher level education. You cannot have higher level education if you don't have research. So I think this is an important message that we have to convey. So I think we are near by the end of our session. I would like to see if there are a couple of questions or comments from the audience. Does anybody want to comment? Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Salim for his commitment to the Arab League and assure him that we are very lucky to have this partnership coming up, inshallah. But again, I want to go back to the lack of stimuli existing in the Arab region in research and development, or in research in general. And the lack of connectivity and the lack of publication is the reason for the lack of stimuli. I mean, the fact that you do excellent research, maybe you get a good grade, maybe you get a promotion, but then it ends up in a drawer, this is very depressing. I was with a group of scientists and researchers. They've done excellent work in the last years. They have no finance to put it on the web. Even if they put it on a web, it's a link without enough traffic, which probably no one knows about, and I assume, I haven't seen it yet, but I assume it would be very bad quality. And that's again the bureaucracy versus the science, you see. And that's it. And so the stimuli comes from being famous, or from being published, or from being known, and this is where we hope ASREN will do, inshallah, a good job. Thank you.
If I may comment on this, researchers, I mean, there are venues for publishing research. It's not just a website. I mean, if you're just putting something on a website, good luck.
Yeah.
And I don't know what ASREN can directly play a role in stimulating research in that, because a researcher can publish if it's a good, well done research, it should be published in regular journals, scientific journals, or whatever journals. And that gives them puts their name and their institution's name in the front. And that is one of the return on investments that Dr. Salim was asking about. That's one of the things. How many publications have been, in the Arab world, how many publications, if you compare them to other parts of the world? I would venture to say that it's very, very minimal. Why? I'm talking about stimulating getting the people to do the research. You were lucky that you met people that were actually doing research, or others doing research or not. And I don't mean to belittle anyone's efforts, obviously. It's just that they need to be pushed. People need to sometimes to have incentives or be pushed to do something. And that should be a priority for the institution itself. It's a mindset for them.
Yeah, of course you're right. But the fact of no one knows, like you just said, you know, my boss knows, my colleague knows, and then it ends there, is very depressing. And it's a lack of stimuli. So yes, we need the professional links and not simply a website, as you say. And I'm looking forward for emerging between government and, again, to fight this bureaucracy, a very decadent old bureaucracy, the private and the government. Thank you.
You know, I just have one comment. I think this is a very challenging and it's a very complicated story, but you know, from my personal perspective, I see it, or I can tell the story as follows. You know, we have to rely on visionary people in the region, which means that you know we need to stimulate and we need to create awareness and we need to encourage our political leaders to take a step forward and invest, not to wait until researchers call for you know, building infrastructure so that this justifies why we need to put it there. I think they have to be like looking forward, which means let's invest in infrastructure, as you do for transportation infrastructure. You know, make the roads ready, make the cable, the infrastructure ready, and then people would really drive on it, and people would really work on it. But if you wait until maybe they don't know, and I know that, you know, for instance, in many of the advanced countries, they really invest so much in building the infrastructure and make it ready for people to use it. So I think we need to work at the decision-making level to tell them, you know, this is something that has been implemented elsewhere, and they need it elsewhere. Why our researchers and universities do not need it? They need it. You know, not necessarily that our clients are the professors. Our clients are the students as well, because the students, they do much better work than the professors. Professors have got their own degrees. Maybe they're just, you know, sending messages and directing students and telling them, but students who spent their nights working on some packages, software packages that they would like to download, and, you know, there are some, you know, let's say, using YouTube or using some of the video lessons that they would like to access, for instance, courseware, or maybe those open source material that they can learn from. And if you jump and you say you're serving like 200 million students in the region, 200 million youth in the region, this is really quite a good number. And our region, the strength of it is because it's a young society. You know, half of our population is just, you know, below the age of 25. And those are the communities that we look forward. And, you know, those are people who are spending their nights struggling with watching a video on Coursera, or maybe attending a lesson on one of those open source resources. If there is a proper infrastructure and really high-speed infrastructure that is available at the dormitories, at universities, they would be spending their days and nights in universities accessing those resources. You know, what I face, for instance, I worked in, you know, a number of universities. I always struggle to convince administrators that we have to invest and make it open. You know, most of the university administrators, they just block things. They're so happy to block things. Why? They're saying because we don't want to kill our bandwidth. You know, just open it up. You know, let the students do whatever they want, and that's where you create innovation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, you are talking about research and the productivity of faculty members in the Arab world. That's very important, that's true. But I would like to state that there is a missing link here. Because, dear friends, you should understand the situation, and mainly financially, of professors of higher education in the Arab world. We are not paid as our friends overseas. I got my PhD in the US, and when I came back to Tunisia, I got the salary of my assistantship as a student. So, if we think about the productivity, I think it's a system. we should improve the well-being of faculty members so they can have a respected salary, and when they have a respected salary, they will be motivated and they will have the brains and the peace of mind to work. And this is a reality. So please make the point here, because that's true. We are not going to count everything money-wise, but that's true. We are underpaid compared to our friends, faculty members in Europe, in the US, in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Okay, just I would like to make a couple of remarks. I am a university professor before being, basically putting the hat of a general manager of CCK. We shouldn't be too harsh on university professor. I have worked in several places. I've worked in the Gulf area. In Tunisia, university professor, lots of them are working very hard. We carry our academic tasks very well. Actually, we do research, etc. Not as much as if, for example, we were in the States or maybe in Europe or in the Gulf region because of many things, actually. Because at least in some area, people are overburdened with several other things, like teaching load is sometimes a little bit high. Sometimes also advising load is a little bit high, and many, many other things. Besides salary, it is not a matter of fact. And the biggest problem actually is the rules and regulation, I would say bureaucracy. I have the experience of working, for example, in Saudi Arabia. Before, there are only some channels to finance research, and people are evaluated based on their research. But there were not as much as if you were, for example, in the States. People were doing research, but not with the same, for example, quality and the same output. And then, toward the end of the 90s, they changed the rules of regulation. Now you can seek industry and seek projects and then boom, things have changed. And they changed the bureaucratic rules. The same in Qatar. The QNRF and the Qatari National Research Fund has energized. They are really seeking expertise everywhere, and you have researchers from everywhere, from the Arab world, from Australia, from the States, from Europe. And this has energized and pushing people to work. And so I think one of the biggest problems is rules and regulation. In Tunisia, for example, even if you keep salary the way they are, it's not a problem. But when you give the opportunity for people to propose, to conduct research, applied research, etc., you have to give them the means to manage that, pay themselves, pay their students, pay their researcher, and things will go. But if you keep the same rules and regulations the way things are done, it's very discouraging for people to do research. Even though lots of people do research, whether applied or fundamental research. The other thing also is that even with all of that, things have been improving a lot. I have been in Tunisia for only 12 years, not a long time compared to some others. And I have seen the change. When I came to Tunisia, I used to access the network from a dial-up connection. See, it's now, no, I have from my home 4 megabit per second. Some do have 8 megabit per second connection from their home. And it costs peanuts compared to what I used to pay when I came in 2000. So things have been improving a lot in terms of what's available and the opportunities to do research, etc. Not only that, this had given opportunities to our students. We have our engineering students, and many of them, they seek, I would say, design projects, final year projects. And they seek to do them with the help of faculty from outside. And we have lots of success stories of people helping from Canada, from Europe, from the States, and that had initiated the guy to move there, etc., and pursue it. So there are several success stories because of the existence of quality networks and that tradition of communicating with people, seeking help, doing things, showing that you know, etc. So the story is not as bad as we might think it is, I think, and things have been improving quite a bit, at least over the 10 years or 12 years I have been in my country here, things have changed quite a bit. I mean, it's from dial-up connection to now several institutions having 100 megabit per second, basically metro Ethernet, metro fast Ethernet. This is pretty good. Not only that if the institution needs, I mean, for example, more bandwidth, it's just a matter of configuration. It is not, the highway is there, the fiber is there, so it's a matter, if you need more, you can have more. As long as just show me that you need this, and there is traffic. And actually, without requesting it, the operator, the national operator, will see that. For CCK, will monitor that and see, this institution is consuming 80% of the available bandwidth. And automatically, you upgrade to the next quantum. You see my point? So I think, at least from what I see, at least stable Arab countries, those who are not subject to turmoil, things have been really improving quite a bit in mentalities, in available resources, etc. Inshallah, ASREN I think it's important to get together into regional networks. This will improve cooperation and synergy among people, and why not the opportunity, instead of just working on projects only north-south, why not south-south? I mean, for example, with African countries, with Arab countries, there is too little research being done horizontally, actually. It's really sort of vertical type of research. Europe, North Africa, or Africa, or North America, etc. Very, very little joint research projects is being conducted among South country, I would say. And I hope that ASREN and things like this will contribute to this South type of cooperation, with, of course, the contribution of still our European partners and North American partners, Australian partners, etc. Thank you.
Just a couple of comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
The doctor from the back. Just one comment, please. I did not mean by any chance to belittle, as I said, the role of the faculty. And when I said to be pushed, and this is the last step, there has to be an infrastructure of support. The environment has to foster this. I cannot require a faculty member to do research if the environment is not there. So it has to start way back before it gets to the requiring the faculty. But it is there, it is happening in other countries. So we should be pushing for this. This is not a topic for ASREN, obviously. So, and I apologize if I am offended anyone.
Thank you very much. And all interesting discussions always, and makes me think over, that was early last year, we had to renew the mandate of CANARI, the Canadian Research and Education Network, which is federally funded and funded for 5 years, and then comes the exam. You have to go to the government and basically justify why you have to exist another 5 years. And the questions are quite tough. Some questions are, for example, how come when I see the distribution of all the universities, 80% of the traffic is generated by 20% of the universities. So not all universities are created equal. And I'm sure if one looks at all networks all over the world, this is true. So in other words, research is not evenly distributed and education is not evenly distributed. One difficult question. Even more difficult is, what do you do in the end when you go down from your academic ladder of big science for the normal citizen? And the one thing they pushed, and I think with reason, was to use the education and research network community as a kind of incubator for small industries. So this resulted in one new project, which is called DAIR, D-A-I-R. So if you search the internet for CANARI under the DAIR program, you will see there is a pot of money for small little companies who want to test and trial out new ideas in a cloud context. Now, I think here, some of you were here yesterday. I think there was a little expo outside, and some young people were exposing a robot to explore the skies, and another one had a robot to explore the deep sea, and you had all kind of little companies. And I asked them, do you know what ASREN is and what the Tunisian education network is? Nobody did. In other words, I think these people who were sitting there outside should have been sitting here listening to some of what we say and vice versa. In other words, I think the big risk is that we work in splendid isolation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to, anyone want to comment? Yeah, Salim.
Just one last comment to carry on. I think discussions would be endless because every time that you pose a question, there are lots of answers, and every time you answer, there are lots of questions that can be posed. But I just want to, to carry on what Yves was mentioning, that those who need the Research Education Network should be in the room. I think it's all about creating awareness, and the ANRENs and the countries, they should play an important role in reaching out to universities and to the end users. Ankabut in United Arab Emirates, they have been very successful in doing what they call users meeting 2 times a year. So they have one in, like in February and one in September, and this has been very successful. They bring all universities, rectors, students, professors, and tell them about resources. They tell them about the capacity. They listen to them. They bring keynote speakers from around the world. And I think this is a practice that, ANRENs in our region should carry on. This is really a great opportunity for users, for students, for faculty members to know there is a great opportunity for them to move forward. And I think this is very important.
Thank you, Salem. So I think it is time to close. I don't know if somebody wants to add something just at the end. So let me add a final consideration regarding the research. I think it is important, of course, that researchers and professors, they get a decent salary. Otherwise, they will not be attracted to do that work. But I think it is more important that they get a good environment for their research and their education activities. And I can give you the experience that we had in Italy. We have several people which are going outside. They go in US, they go in UK, in Germany, in other countries, and they are quite successful. And it is, of course, a sort of chicken and egg problem. If you are not smart, you will not have a success, so you will not be a professor in a university in US or in Germany. But sometimes our government thinks that this is a problem and they have to get back these people home. And what they think is that, well, I give them the positions in universities. This is not enough. Even if you give them the same salary that they get outside, this is not enough. You have to provide the good environment for their research and their education activities. If they come and they don't have the money to make the research they want, this is stupid. They will come back. They will never remain there, because if you want to make your research, this is the most important thing that you do as a researcher. This is the priority you have. So if they don't provide money to make research, no way. They will stay there where they are. So this is the important message. It is not a matter only on salary. It is a matter of environment, which means funding for research, funding for education, good networks, good services. This creates the environment which facilitates research and education. And yeah, of course. So, and so the problem is, has many phases. And you should try to attack all these phases at the same time. We cannot solve, of course, all these problems here today, and probably never tomorrow. And I think the message we have is that we have still to work hard in order to provide at least a good research environment from the point of view of the infrastructures. And this will possibly facilitate the process of increasing the activities in research and education in the Arab world. And this will bring possibly many countries and many universities in the Arab world at becoming, at the level of the best universities and research centers in the world. So thank you very much for your participation. You want to say something?
I just have a small comment and a question. So I'm not a part of the educational system. I was a student. That's what just I did in my life in the educational system. So, but I lived in Canada for almost around 30 years, and in the States as well. So all what I heard tonight is creating the environment. Government should create the environment, salaries. So looking back at a country like the US, where the research is a very, very fundamental part of the educational institutions, Canada as well. I'm giving the examples of those two countries because I know pretty well. So we know, we see most of the funding that the government is giving to the educational institutions, we see that it's being cut year after year after year after year. So the budget has been reduced. So the educational institutions are looking for the private sectors. So, and I know that very well because we are being approached on a regular basis for funding. And I remember back from my years at the university, we used to work good part of the year just applying for grants, whether from government and from the private sector. So I don't see here any involvement, or I've been working in the Abu Dhabi for the last 3 years. We haven't been approached by any university, for example, for a special fund or a grant to fund a certain research that could help us. He was saying that, you know, the educational institutions are the incubators for the industry, and I don't see that here in the Arab world. This is what's lacking. I think that universities and research centers, they should push hard for grants from the private sector. And I give you an example for, I know that very well, that most of the heart research in Canada and the US is being funded by American Heart Association and the Canadian Heart and Stroke Foundation. So those are non-profit organizations working on those two countries. They are investing much more than the government funds in these fields.
Okay, thank you. It is an important comment. Indeed, if you look at the situation in general, half of the investment in research should possibly come from private sector. I mean, it's not only governmental funding. The problem is that sometimes you have difficulties to find the private sector that is willing to invest in research, and sometimes they do not in a very, constant way. So you cannot count on them for long-term sustainability of some of the activities. But of course, I mean, your comment is relevant. In private research funding is an important asset for the development of a country. Yeah, Salem.
Just a quick comment on what you just mentioned. I think the driver in the US and Western countries about private sector investing or funding research is because part of their revenues of income tax, this can be waived from the government if they sponsor and support research, but this is not the case in our countries. It's because, for instance, in Abu Dhabi, if you invest or if you fund, what is the value for you as a private company? You're just paying part of your profit or a share to the universities. But if the motivation was that your income tax, instead of paying it to the government, that you invest in projects that can bring to you some innovation afterwards, that's where you get the benefits as a company, and that's the driver for what you get. This is not the case in our countries.
One of the drivers.
Yes, I mean, one of the drivers, but it's again monetary things.
Okay, so thank you very much for the participation to this session. It is the last session of the day, I think. Yusuf, do you want to say something? Or,
I would like to first thank the speaker, the panelists. Thank you.